We gather today not merely to remember a man, nor simply to commemorate a moment in history, but to listen closely to the echoes of a dream that once shook the conscience of a nation and still reverberates through the unfinished corridors of our time. This dream was not born in comfort nor raised in ease. It was conceived in the midst of struggle, baptized in sacrifice, and carried forward by people who believed that justice, though delayed, could not be denied forever. This dream spoke in the language of hope, but it was sharpened by truth. It dared to imagine a society where human dignity was not rationed, where opportunity was not inherited by privilege alone, and where the worth of a person was not measured by the color of their skin, the size of their bank account, or the accident of their birthplace. It was a dream that refused to accept injustice as normal, cruelty as inevitable, or inequality as permanent. And yet today, decades later, we must confess, honestly and without illusion, that the dream still waits for its full awakening. The dream echoes because it was never completed. It echoes because it was interrupted. It echoes because while laws were changed, hearts were slower to follow. While doors were opened, too many remained barred. While promises were written, they were not always honored. The echo reminds us that progress without perseverance becomes complacency, and remembrance without responsibility becomes ritual. There was a time when segregation wore clear signs and spoke plainly. There was a time when injustice announced itself boldly, when hatred marched openly, when discrimination was etched into law and defended without shame. That era demanded courage of a particular kind, the courage to stand where standing was dangerous, to speak where speaking invited violence, to march where marching invited death. But injustice has learned new disguises. Today it hides behind polite language, behind complex systems, behind claims of neutrality and inevitability. It no longer always shouts, sometimes it whispers. It does not always exclude, sometimes it exhausts. It does not always strike with force. Sometimes it suffocates slowly, depriving communities of resources, opportunities, and hope until despair feels like destiny. The dream demands that we see these disguises clearly. We see them in neighborhoods where schools are underfunded and overcrowded, while a few miles away, opportunity overflows. We see them in healthcare systems where life expectancy is determined not by biology alone, but by zip code. We see them in criminal justice systems where punishment often precedes understanding and mercy is rationed along invisible lines. We see them in labor that is essential yet undervalued, in voices that are necessary yet ignored, in lives that are mourned briefly and forgotten too quickly. The dream does not ask us to be comfortable observers. It demands that we become restless participants. Justice, we must remember, is not merely the absence of oppression, it is the presence of equity. It is not enough to remove chains if we do not also remove barriers. It is not enough to condemn hatred if we do not dismantle the systems that allow it to thrive. Justice is active, it moves, it insists, it interrupts, and it always comes with a cost. The dream that still demands justice has never been cheap. It has always required sacrifice from those who risked their safety, from those who surrendered their silence, from those who chose love in the face of hatred and discipline in the face of despair. Nonviolence was never weakness. It was moral strength under pressure. It was the refusal to become what one opposed. It was the belief that dignity could disarm brutality, that truth could outlast terror. That belief is tested again in our time. We live in an age of unprecedented connection and profound division. Words travel faster than wisdom. Anger spreads more quickly than understanding. We are surrounded by information, yet starved for insight. We shout across ideological lines, convinced that volume can substitute for listening, that victory can replace reconciliation, But the dream does not call us to conquer one another. It calls us to confront injustice together. It challenges us to reject the easy narratives that divide the world into villains and innocents, and instead grapple with the harder truth that systems can be unjust even when individuals believe themselves fair, that silence can participate in harm, that neutrality in the face of oppression always favors the status quo. The dream demands moral clarity, not moral comfort. It asks us difficult questions. Who benefits from the way things are? Who bears the burden? Who gets to wait and who has been waiting for generations? It asks whether our policies reflect our professed values, whether our institutions protect the vulnerable or merely preserve the powerful, whether our democracy is as inclusive in practice as it is in principle. The dream also demands that we confront economic injustice with the same urgency as racial injustice, for these struggles are intertwined. Poverty is not an accident. It is the predictable result of choices made and priorities set. A society that celebrates abundance while tolerating deprivation betrays its own moral foundation. A nation that honors labor in words but not in wages undermines the dignity of work itself. Justice cannot flourish where survival is a daily battle. The dream envisions an economy that serves people rather than consumes them, that values contribution over accumulation, that recognizes that prosperity without fairness is fragile and freedom without security is incomplete. It challenges us to measure success not only by growth, but by inclusion, not only by profit, but by well-being. And yet, even as the dream demands structural change, it never abandons the moral responsibility of the individual. It reminds us that laws can restrain behavior, but only conscience can transform character. It calls each person to examine their own assumptions, their own fears, their own complicity. It invites us to move beyond performative justice into lived justice. Justice practiced in workplaces, classrooms, congregations, and homes. The dream insists that love is not sentimental. It is disciplined. It is demanding. It is the fierce commitment to the dignity of every human being, including those with whom we disagree. It is not passive acceptance of wrong, but active resistance to it without surrendering our humanity. This love does not ask us to ignore pain. It asks us to transform it. In moments of national fatigue, when progress feels slow and backlash feels swift, the dream reminds us that history bends only when pushed. Every gain that has expanded freedom was once dismissed as impossible, impractical, or premature. Every movement that reshaped society began with voices that were told to wait, to be patient, to accept less. But the dream has never been patient with injustice. It knows that delay is often denial in disguise. It knows that telling the oppressed to wait is to ask them to bear a burden they did not create. It knows that justice postponed corrodes trust and breeds despair. And so it urges us to act, not recklessly, not violently, but persistently, strategically, and together. The dream is not naive about resistance. It knows that power rarely concedes without pressure. It knows that progress provokes fear in those who mistake dominance for stability. It knows that movements will be mischaracterized, that leaders will be targeted, that sacrifices will be demanded. But it also knows that moral courage is contagious, that truth has endurance, and that solidarity multiplies strength. We are heirs to this dream, whether we choose the inheritance or not. The question is not whether the dream still speaks. The question is whether we are willing to listen beyond ceremony, beyond quotation, beyond nostalgia. The dream does not belong to history alone. It belongs to every generation that encounters injustice and must decide whether to normalize it or challenge it. It belongs to young people who refuse to inherit silence. It belongs to workers who demand dignity. It belongs to communities who organize not because it is easy, but because it is necessary. It belongs to all who believe that democracy is not a spectator sport and that freedom requires participation. The dream still demands justice because justice is still unfinished. It demands that we protect the right to vote not as a partisan tool, but as a sacred expression of equal citizenship. It demands that we confront violence not only with enforcement, but with prevention, investment, and care. It demands that we tell honest stories about our past, not to dwell in guilt, but to grow in wisdom. It demands that we imagine a future where difference is not feared, where disagreement does not devolve into dehumanization, where accountability and compassion walk side by side. This dream does not promise ease, it promises meaning. And so we are called not to admire the dream from a distance, but to carry it forward with courage suited to our time. We are called to translate its moral clarity into policies that heal, institutions that serve, and communities that include. We are called to resist despair, to reject cynicism, and to believe that collective action guided by conscience can still reshape the world. The echo we hear today is not fading, it is summoning. It asks whether we will be the generation that preserved the language of justice while abandoning its labor, or the generation that recognized that dreams survive only when they are enacted, protected, and renewed by those willing to stand in the tension between what is and what must be, willing to speak when silence is safer, willing to act when apathy is easier, willing to believe that even now, even here, the arc of the moral universe can be bent again if enough hands are placed upon it, if enough hearts refuse to harden, if enough voices rise not in anger alone, but in disciplined hope, in persistent love, in the unyielding conviction that justice is not a gift bestowed by the powerful, but a right claimed by the people, and that this dream, still echoing across generations, still calling across the unfinished landscape of our common life, will not be silenced as long as there are those who hear it and choose to answer, who understand that remembrance without action is betrayal, that hope without courage is hollow, and that the true measure of our time will not be found in what we celebrated, but in what we were willing to change, what we were willing to risk, what we were willing to become as we step forward together into the long and demanding work of justice that still waits for its full realization in a world that remains unfinished, in a nation still becoming, in a humanity still struggling toward the promise that all are created equal, all are deserving of dignity, and all are bound together in a shared destiny that cannot be fulfilled until justice rolls freely through every street, every institution, every heart, carrying with it not only the memory of a dream, but the living force of a people determined to make it real, determined to refuse surrender, determined to insist again and again that the echoes will become a voice, the voice will become a movement, and the movement will continue pressing forward through resistance and weariness, through progress and setback, through history and hope, until justice is no longer an aspiration spoken on anniversaries, but a reality practiced daily, sustained collectively, and guarded fiercely by generations who understand that the dream was never meant to end in applause, but to live on in struggle, in commitment, in the unfinished work that still demands our hands, our minds, our courage, and our unrelenting belief. That the moral call we hear today is not fading into the past, but rising urgently into the present, asking us now, in this moment, in this shared responsibility, whether we will answer or turn away as the echoes continue to sound, carrying forward the dream that still demands justice, because justice has not yet fully arrived in the lives of all, because freedom remains unevenly distributed, because dignity is still too often denied, because the work is not done, because the call has not been satisfied, because the dream still waits to be carried beyond words and into the living reality of a society transformed by conscience, by courage, by love disciplined enough to endure, and by a justice that refuses to rest as long as there are those left unheard, unseen, and unprotected. And so the echo remains, asking, urging, insisting, as we stand once more at the threshold of choice, knowing that what we do next will determine whether the dream continues merely as an echo or begins again to rise as a living force shaping the world we are still in the process of becoming. A world that calls us forward even now, even here, even as the echoes of that dream press upon us, demanding justice still, demanding justice now, demanding justice not someday but today, demanding that we do more than remember, demanding that we become, demanding that we act, demanding that we carry forward the weight and wonder of a dream that was never finished and was never meant to be finished by one generation alone, but entrusted to all who hear its call and choose not to look away. As the echo grows louder, more insistent, more urgent, asking us to step fully into the responsibility of shaping a future where justice is not postponed, not negotiated away, not selectively applied, but lived, defended, and sustained by a people who finally understand that the dream will continue to demand justice for as long as injustice remains, and that answering that demand requires not a single speech, not a single march, not a single law, but a lifelong commitment to the work that still lies before us, the work that continues unfolding as we speak, as we gather, as we listen to the echo and recognize that it is calling us not toward closure, not toward comfort, but toward the long, unfinished road ahead, where the dream still waits for hands willing to carry it forward into a future that has not yet been written, but is already asking us to decide who we will be as the echo continues and justice remains not yet complete, not yet secure, not yet fully realized in the lives of all. And so the dream persists, unresolved, unfinished, and still demanding that we move forward together into the work that remains, into the struggle that continues, into the responsibility that cannot be deferred, as the echo calls us onward, onward, onward into the demanding promise of justice that still lies before us, unfinished and calling us still as we stand at this moment, hearing it clearly, knowing that the next step belongs to us, knowing that the dream does not end here, knowing that it presses forward beyond this moment, beyond these words, beyond this gathering, into the choices we will make next as the echo continues to rise and justice remains waiting for those willing to answer the call and carry the dream forward into a world that still needs it, still demands it, still calls for it, still waits for justice to arrive, not as an echo, but as a living, breathing reality shaped by what we choose to do now, together, as the sound of the dream continues to resonate and refuses to fade, refusing to be silenced, refusing to be concluded, refusing to be finished, because the work itself is not yet done and the demand remains as strong as ever, pressing upon us, calling us forward, asking us to rise and move even now, even as these words continue, even as the echo carries on, unfinished, unresolved, and still demanding justice in a world that has not yet fulfilled its promise, and therefore still calls us to act, to believe, to struggle, to carry the dream onward as it continues to echo without end, without closure, without conclusion, demanding justice still, demanding justice now, demanding justice as we move forward into the open, unfinished future that waits for our response, our courage, our commitment, and our willingness to step into the work that remains as the echo continues and continues and continues, asking us to answer not with silence, not with delay, but with action that begins now and moves forward into the long, unending work of justice that still calls to us, still demands us, still waits for us to step fully into the responsibility that history has placed in our hands as the dream continues to echo, unfinished, unended, still calling, still demanding justice as we stand at this moment and move forward into what comes next, knowing that the dream does not conclude here but carries on, echoing still, demanding justice as we continue forward into the work that has not yet reached its end, not yet reached its fulfillment, not yet reached the moment when justice can finally rest, because that moment has not yet arrived. And so the echo remains alive, persistent, and calling us onward into the work that continues without an ending, without a final sentence, without a conclusion, because justice itself is still unfinished and the dream continues to demand it as we move forward into the responsibility that now belongs to us. And so the echo continues, calling us onward into the future that waits for what we will do next, as justice remains unfinished and the dream still demands, still calls, still echoes, still insists, as we move forward into the ongoing work of justice that remains unfinished and unresolved, and still calling us forward as we stand here, hearing it clearly, knowing it does not end here, knowing it does not stop now, knowing that the echo carries on as justice remains unfinished and still demands our action, our courage, our commitment, and our willingness to continue forward into the long and unfinished work that still lies ahead as the dream continues to echo, demanding justice still, demanding justice now, demanding justice without end, without closure, without finality, because the work is not finished and the call continues as we move forward into what comes next, carrying the echo with us as we step into the ongoing struggle for justice that still waits for its fulfillment and still demands our response as the echo continues and does not end, does not conclude, does not resolve, but carries forward into the future that remains open, unfinished, and still calling us onward. And so, as we stand at this crossroads of memory and responsibility, we are reminded that the measure of a dream is not found in how beautifully it is spoken, but in how faithfully it is lived. The echoes we hear today are not relics of a bygone era. They are moral summons calling each generation to account. They remind us that justice is not self-executing, that freedom does not sustain itself, and that progress retreats when conscience grows weary. The dream still demands justice because injustice still breathes among us, in subtle policies and loud prejudices, in neglected communities and unequal chances, in the quiet acceptance of conditions we know are wrong. And if we are honest, the greatest threat to the dream is no longer open hatred alone, but indifference, the slow erosion of urgency, the temptation to believe that what has been gained is enough. But enough has never been enough where dignity is denied. We are therefore called to carry this dream forward not as admirers, but as stewards, to teach it to our children not only in stories, but in systems that serve them fairly, to defend it not only with words, but with laws that protect the vulnerable and practices that honor human worth, to embody it not occasionally, but consistently, until justice becomes not an exception, but a habit. This is the work before us, not glamorous, not easy, often uncomfortable, yet necessary, for history does not ask whether we felt inspired, it asks whether we acted. It does not remember our intentions as clearly as it records our choices, and generations yet unborn will not judge us by what we quoted, but by what we were willing to change. If the dream is to move from echo to reality, it will be because ordinary people chose extraordinary courage, because they refused to surrender hope to cynicism, refused to trade justice for convenience, refused to believe that the world must remain as it is. It will be because we understood that the arc of history bends only when hands are placed firmly upon it, and that those hands must belong to us. So let us leave this moment not satisfied but committed, not comforted but resolved. Let us carry forward the dream, not as a memory frozen in time, but as a living demand pressing upon our conscience, shaping our actions, guiding our future. And let us do so with the unshakable belief that justice, though delayed, is still possible, still necessary, and still worthy of every effort we can give, until the dream no longer echoes as an unmet promise, but stands fulfilled in the lived reality of a people who chose to answer its call.